Welcome to another episode of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are two retired New York City police detectives. And if you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, so you'll get all things DutyRon and Ed Wallace. He's over there. I keep poking him, but he keeps moving away. When we go live or upload another video, hey, tonight we're going to get into it. We have two spectacular guests. Ed, we got Barbara Butcher here. Everyone knows and loves her. 20-something years, 24 years in the New York City Medical Examiner's Office, Chief of Staff, legal medical death investigator. Let me tell you something about Barbara. She knows her stuff. I said stuff. I didn't say the bad word. Barbara is here with us. Ed, how you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. It was really busy in the morning, and I got a lot of stuff to do after I get off this show. It's no rest for the weary.
I know. Hey, listen, so we have so much to talk about. We're going to introduce Barbara. I could see Dr. Young is trying to make it into the studio. There's so many questions circling around Kiely Rodni. So we have this 18-page final coroner's report. You and I went over this thing. I'm going to have it up on the screen. But there's so many questions, so many. I think that the real problem exists, Ed, is that there's so much misinformation, and I feel tonight we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to talk with Barbara. We're going to talk with Dr. Young, and he is going to give us, under no uncertain terms, what this 18-page document is and what it says, and we're going to talk to him and her about this stuff. So I know that you're excited to get into this, Ed. You've been chomping at the bit on this, and again, we're gonna try to dispel as many rumors, because here we want to learn. We want everyone to learn. We want to teach everybody what this stuff says, because even to me, when I first started reading this stuff, it seemed foreign to me because I was not in the medical examiner's field. We worked in a police department. So let's get Barbara on, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Dr. Thomas Young had the audio corrected. Let's see how we are going to make out here. Barbara, thank you.
Hey, DutyRon. Hey, Ed. How's everyone?
All right. Good evening, Barbara. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Always good to see you.
And you know, Barbara, whenever we have turmoil or if we have misinformation that swirls about in Twitter sphere and out there in Facebook land and all over the internet, we always like to circle back to you, because you keep us not only grounded, but you give us you give us what it is and how it's done. So I thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Ron. And I'm glad we have Dr. Young on tonight. I think he can back me up and perhaps go deeper on some of the questions that are, that are floating out there, so to speak.
And I'm going to give you the honors and let you introduce Dr. Young, and we'll add him on as you speak.
Okay, sounds good. So, folks, today we have our special guest, Dr. Young. He's an experienced full-time pathologist. He has performed nearly 6,000 autopsies and testified in civil and criminal court more than 500 times and provided deposition testimony in more than 135 times. And since January of 2007, Dr. Young has provided consultant services in forensic pathology as a self-employed person, consulting in cases throughout the United States and other areas of the world. Prior to his self-employment, Dr. Young was the Jackson County Medical Examiner for 11 and a half years, serving as the chief death investigator for the Metropolitan Kansas City on the Missouri side of the state line. He modernized the death investigation system, obtaining for the office full accreditation by the National Association of Medical Examiners. The office remains the only nationally accredited death investigation agency in Missouri.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed with that. Doc, welcome. I'm hoping that we got the ears going. Can we hear you? Can you hear us?
Well, I can certainly hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, home run.
Thank you.
Doc, did I leave anything out?
It sounds like you covered the waterfront.
All right, there you go, sir.
Hey, Doc, if you don't mind, before we go into it, again, I want to just say thank you. Thank you so much for taking out the time of your busy schedule. The community here on Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed, we really appreciate when we have professionals like you come on to give us clear and concise information when it comes to this stuff. And, you know, there's so many cyber sleuths out there and people who really follow true crime. It's a huge genre out there. And there's over 1,400, 1,500 live folks watching now. I have to just say again, I tip my cap to you and I give you thanks and praise for coming on tonight with us. Is there anything that we missed maybe that you might want to add to, or as a self intro? I'll put you full screen. You could talk to the audience.
I don't have anything to add to what you've
Okay.
already said.
All right. I wanted to make sure my partner got everything straight. I think that we are straight. Ed, you want to take it from here? What we're going to discuss tonight with Barbara and Dr. Young?
Yes. So, folks, we have 3 different forensic disciplines represented here. We have myself as a certified senior crime scene analyst. We have Barbara Butcher here as a medical legal death investigator, and we have our forensic pathologist. So we, between the 3 of us, and of course Ron in the background reading questions that you all pose to us, we should be able to dispel the myths, give you a better education about what transpired in this case that we're dealing with. So, Barbara, would you like to start off, or do you want me to start?
Sure.
Go ahead.
First of all, Dr. Young, I see you trained with Randy Hanslick in Fulton County.
Yes, ma'am, I sure did.
Yeah, he's an old friend. Well, he was an old friend of mine. Sorry to hear of his passing last year. And so then you're well aware of the problems in this country on the coroner system versus the medical examiner system. And that's going to inform some of our questions tonight. So let's go right into the autopsy. This autopsy is conducted by a forensic pathologist, not the coroner, as people get mixed up. The coroner is a sheriff who is elected and takes the facts from the medical examiner's autopsy and from the police investigation and comes up with a manner of death. Cause of death, as found by the forensic pathologist, is drowning, right? We see no evidence of external injury. Now we did see a positive toxicology for ethanol and marijuana and some nicotine. Do you have anything in that autopsy that caused you concern, that you questioned, or that didn't seem to be done to the standards and protocols that you know?
Not at all. I thought the autopsy was very thorough and did what you would hope that a forensic autopsy would do.
Okay. And some people have questioned the identification. According to the report, it states that Detective, I don't remember his name, made the identification at the autopsy. And we all know that we do have the police officers come in at an autopsy and identify that this is indeed the body as delivered, as recovered. But what about the forensic identification of this young lady who was badly decomposed?
Well, there may be several avenues by which one could identify the body here. One of them that is obvious here is that she has had orthopedic hardware in her left forearm.
Mm-hmm.
What can happen there is that one can compare the radiographs that were taken to the hospital with the postmortem radiographs, and there may be individual characteristics that could confirm an identification. There are already several items here that indicate that this is, I think her name is Kiely.
Yeah,
That's correct.
I mean, she's in Kiely's car. She has several items on her body, and her general appearance appears to be consistent with being Kiely.
mm-hmm.
And certainly not every teenager is walking around with orthopedic hardware in their forearm.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's even a comparison of some of the fine detail in the orthopedic hardware, the angle of the screws, whether there may be some screws that have kind of pulled out, how many screws are present.
Right.
A lot of that can go to make an identification the only plausible explanation.
Now, Doc, if I may, That would be something more in line for a pathologist to do or a radiologist to do if they're doing comparisons of X-ray to X-ray. Correct?
Well, I don't see why a detective can't do that too. Now, as far as what the detective did, I don't have any information out of Dr. Reiber's report, but it does say that there is a report which discusses the identification.
Yeah, the modality. Yeah.
I don't think you forwarded that report to me.
No, it wasn't released.
Okay, there may be more detail in that would say what he did.
Okay, and you talked about class characteristic evidence in the fact of the orthopedic hardware. Now we can do better than that with individualistic identification of that hardware, especially if it was serial numbered.
Sure, that
Right,
could work too.
and that would require you to physically look at it, open it up and look at it to get the serial number, and then get records from.
Sure, which would not be a problem.
Right, and then get medical records from the orthopedic surgeon that placed the medical device in there, and then that would have.
Right.
That would. Good. Sir, you were going to say something? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Some people have questioned that there was her lung findings. There was no water in the lungs. Can you explain so that everyone can understand about osmotic membranes and freshwater versus saltwater drownings, what the findings are?
The findings for drowning are non-specific. You can't really tell a drowning lung from just a lung that has pulmonary edema. Trying to make a distinction between the two is not possible.
Can you talk about
the determination of drowning in this situation?
Go ahead, please continue. No,
Go
please
ahead.
stop. Continue.
There really isn't any way to make a distinction of drowning lungs versus just lungs that have pulmonary edema, which means water in the lungs. Even if you were to perform, somebody were to have had cardiopulmonary resuscitation performed on them, frequently the lungs at autopsy are engorged with watery fluid. It's a typical autopsy finding. And to be able to reliably tell the difference at autopsy between drowning and many other conditions is just not possible.
Now, in this case, if I read the report correctly, there were no findings of edema or fluids in the lung. Is that correct?
Let me look at the report.
I believe it said something about hyperinflation due to the gases of decomposition.
Well, this is another problem here. It mentions that the right lung weighs 100 grams and the left lung weighs 110 grams. These are very light lungs.
Mm-hmm.
However, with decomposition, all the organs get lighter. That's one of the characteristics of decomposition is you get the body is lighter and the organs are lighter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Doc, can you talk about dry drowning and the mechanisms involved in that?
Well, there are all kinds of theories here. Now, everything about her, she's decomposed.
Mm-hmm.
So all these kinds of distinctions really cannot be made in a decomposed body. But what has been thought to be characteristic of dry drowning is that the airway gets closed off during the drowning process. And so there isn't any inhalation of water. So the lungs are not heavy. That's the theory behind it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Barbara?
I've read, Doctor, that during a freshwater drowning, that the membrane between the air sacs, the alveoli, and the arterioles or the blood vessels, that membrane, water travels back and forth across it, and that in freshwater drowning, that water crosses the membrane into the circulatory system and causes electrolyte disturbance and quite rapid heart failure. Whereas salt water, the osmotic differential causes the water to stay more in the lung, to fill up the alveoli. Does that have any bearing on the findings in Kiely's autopsy?
No, all of that is highly theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Kiely's autopsy, she's decomposed.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So a lot of the findings are going to be equivocal or absent because the tissues are damaged from just the processes and of decomposition and bacterial action. Was there anything that you think that they missed in terms of trauma that that they didn't specifically mention?
Well, here's the thing. Dr. Reiber did the autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. He
Yeah.
was there. I wasn't. He didn't see any trauma. I'm not in a position to argue with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a very thorough autopsy. The external findings were benign, and other than decomposition, they were unremarkable. And I think that the questions that come up among people are just through what I would call a common misconception that when you drown, your lungs fill with water, and so you get no air, and that's the end of that. So as my mentor, Charles Hirsch, used to say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Mhm.
So I
Okay,
think
yeah.
here that people don't know the decomposition process.
Doc, there's some questions.
And
I'm sorry.
Okay,
go ahead, Ed.
go ahead.
Yeah, Doc, there's some questions about the toxicology. From reading the report, there were it appears to be multiple organ samples were collected and stored and saved. And the liver samples were submitted to the toxicology lab. And then a panel of tests were asked to be performed. And so in this case, it was just the liver that was submitted, and people saying, well, why weren't the other organs sent as well? Can you speak on that? What is the, in this case, with the amount of decomp and so forth, that what you see here, and what your opinion on of what they're questioning about, why weren't the other samples sent and so forth?
In a situation where there's decomposition, you're not going to find any blood. You're not going to find any urine, and you're not going to find any eyeball fluid. Mm-hmm. What you are left with are organs such as the liver, the brain, or the skeletal muscle. When they're utilizing a National Medical Services laboratory, it costs them money to run toxicology. So they're not going to send all the specimens and say, please test all the specimens. That's expensive. So what they do there is that they send the liver, and the NMS lab tests the liver.
Mm-hmm. So they made a determination that this was going to be the best possible sample to send, and we can do this specific panel. In this case, if you could scroll down to the panel, Ron. All right, if you scroll down to the panel.
Here you go.
Keep coming, keep coming.
Keep going.
All right.
There.
A little higher, a little higher. It should be on page 1. Okay, right there. Okay, so here's the panel here. It's panel 8052T as in Tango, I as in India. Okay, and for those of you who don't know, that this particular panel tests for 178 analytes, mostly your drugs, okay? And fentanyl is in here as well. So for those of you who keep saying they didn't test for fentanyl, they didn't test for fentanyl, they did. They did test for fentanyl. It's in this panel. Okay, and the only thing that's reported in this toxicology report is what tested positive based upon their threshold of their GC mass spec analysis or the other tests that they performed. All righty.
Okay.
Any other questions here from the audience?
There was one question, Dr. Young, on the autopsy itself. They put the manner of death, I mean, the cause of death, drowning, but no manner. I think that made me jump as someone who comes from a medical examiner system. But can you explain about how the coroner system works and how things are done there?
Okay, do you want me to explain what is meant by cause and manner, or do you want me to explain about coroners, medical examiners, et cetera? Which do you want me to do?
Both. What the heck?
Okay. The cause of death is a condition that leads to a cascade of events that eventuates in death. It's usually the first domino that is knocked over. In this situation, she's found in a car that's submerged in a reservoir. Cause of death here is drowning. Manner of death is a one-word description of the circumstances surrounding the death. A death may be something that is inside of the body. That's called a natural death. If the death is from an external cause, that's a violent death. Violent deaths, one can have a homicide, which means that another person or other people intended to cause the death. There may be a suicide where it is there's self-destructive intent. And then if you have a violent death in which there's no evidence of other destructive or self-destructive intent, that's called an accident. And if it can't be narrowed down to one manner, it's called undetermined. In this particular case, and many of the details surrounding the investigation are not in the autopsy report, and I'm not even aware of what they are. Mm-hmm. Apparently, at the end of the investigation, the sheriff coroner determined that this was a violent death, which drowning is. There isn't any evidence that anybody intended to kill her, and there was no evidence that indicated that she intended to kill herself. As such, they called this an accident for manner.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yes. Okay. That was the coroner that made that determination. The pathologist just had his findings and as to cause, and then the coroner makes the determination in that system as to manner.
Well, that's a reasonable assumption because Dr. Reiber here doesn't mention the manner. He offers his opinion of cause of death in which he says it's drowning. Mm-hmm. So it's reasonable to assume that the manner of death is assigned by the sheriff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Regarding death investigation systems in the United States, widely variable from state to state. Some places there are state medical examiner systems where there's usually a full-time physician or forensic pathologist who's the head of the agency, or there may be county medical examiners or even regional medical examiners. These are usually physicians who are appointed to these positions and not elected. And then there are coroner systems. Some places require coroners to be physicians. A lot of places don't require coroners to be physicians. In Kansas, which is the state next to where I live, in order to be a coroner, you have to be a physician. And it's usually for a district. In California, they have a sheriff coroner system, which means that the elected sheriff is the coroner. They use forensic pathologists, but mostly for performing the autopsy, and also as a consultant. But the doctor here is not running the investigation, and he's not in charge of, perhaps in this case, determining the manner of death.
Mhm.
Doc, when you do an autopsy in a case like this, what are all the things that you would like to have before you make your determination?
Okay, there's one thing for certain, and I try to point this out as often as I can, is that the autopsy is not enough. Now, we can sit there and look at the autopsy and the autopsy findings, and even look at the toxicology results. We could even look at them with an electron microscope. But that is not going to be reliable for really determining what happened and who is responsible for what happened. Of course, the manner of death talks about who is responsible for what happened, or if anybody at all is responsible. What is necessary is that there has to be an examination of what witnesses saw and heard regarding the case. There has to be an investigation of the past events as related by eyewitnesses. And these need to be compared to the findings at autopsy and the other laboratory tests that go on. There needs to be a sense of the two. To just simply have an autopsy and nothing else means that you're in a position where you're having to speculate, and speculating doesn't work. The thing that is perhaps a little bit frustrating for me about this is that you're providing me with a report of the autopsy, but there are lots and lots of questions that are not answered in the autopsy, nor can be answered in the autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
Questions like, what was she last seen doing before she died? What was her activity? Where was she? I understand that she was at a party. Who saw her at the party? Did she tell anybody that she was leaving? Did anybody see her leave? Did anybody see her drive off in the car? Was she in the car by herself, or was she with somebody else? Where was she going? Where's her home? Or where's the apartment? Is the reservoir on the way home, or is it way off the beaten path? These are all kinds of questions that come up that are very, very, very important in doing an investigation. But none of that would be something that Dr. Reiber would be able to provide in an autopsy, nor would NMS Laboratories be able to provide it in a toxicology report.
Mm-hmm.
Yet these are the questions that I have.
Right. So in our system here, and I know Barbara can speak more thoroughly on it, I know our pathologists will get our NYPD, what we call DD5, and it's the investigation paperwork from the assigned detective. They would also have access to all the crime scene reports, photographs, laboratory testing. In addition, Barbara and being the medical legal death investigator, they would have all of Barbara's material from her scene visit and her examination of the body from the scene. And all of these things would be given to the pathologist so that they can review all of them and then use that in their findings.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's the difference between the coroner's system and the medical examiner system in this particular jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
the sheriff was
for
given
our purposes right here,
yeah.
If we're just sitting here staring at the autopsy report, we're not going to learn very much. We can't. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure an investigation took place here. Okay, but you don't have access to those materials. I'd like to know what their investigation showed. So it's a little bit frustrating for me. All I have here is an autopsy. Yeah. It's a great autopsy. It's very thorough, but it's not enough.
Nope, you're right. 100%. We don't have access to all that other information.
Yeah. All we can do is, for the listeners and, the people watching, is explain to them what this autopsy report found, Is it a good, thorough autopsy? And I think that's obvious that it is. The findings were clear, and that's all we can do. As far as the police investigation, the coroner's investigation, and the sheriff's investigation, they're not releasing their findings to us. So I think we can be satisfied that Dr. Reber did a thorough job here on the autopsy, and the rest is up to as you said, the circumstances under which the decedent was found. The scene tells us everything about the manner of death. The autopsy tells us the cause of death. So this is what we've got.
Okay, but I would argue that it's more than just the scene.
Mhm.
It's important to know what witnesses saw and heard. Okay, it's important to get a timeline of events as to what happened according to witness accounts. This is something that usually law enforcement officers or detectives go into great detail, especially if it's determined to be a criminal investigation. They sit down, they talk to witnesses, they get a timeline of events. They try to make that timeline as continuous as possible. You identify when she was last seen alive. You identify when she was found. You fill in as many blanks as you can. This is more than just the scene, and this is more than just the autopsy. It's an investigation. It's a witness investigation. Very important.
Right. It's the totality.
Actually essential.
Yes. It's the totality of all the circumstances. And so I was trying earlier to get a homicide detective to join us so we can have all of these us to discuss, okay, this is what the homicide detective does. This is what I do as a crime scene investigator. This is what Barbara does as the medical legal death investigator. And that
Sure.
we're all working to get the information and analyze the information and then give it to the pathologist and let the pathologist use it for their work. And that's, unfortunately, we don't have that here. But, like I said, this channel, we try to educate the public on what is the actual findings in the autopsy. What does it mean? Why was the liver taken and submitted as opposed to something else? So we're answering out all these questions that many of our audience members have regarding this forensic work.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. I wanted to come back in, and I just wanted to jump in here quickly because there's a couple of people that are in the chat that were asking questions, and we appreciate you guys sending in your questions and your comments. Dr. Young and Barbara Butcher are here with Ed Wallace answering questions in regards to the autopsy, and some very good points came up. I mean, Dr. Young, you brought up so many great points in regards to this, and that we're working with limited information. The totality of this investigation is how this happened, where it happened, why it happened. All of that has not been released. But there were so many questions. And Barbara, I'm going to get into in the second half of this with you some of the questions that came in user generated, and they're going to be rapid fired towards the end of this. Now, Doc, I promised you I only hold you a half hour, and I'm over 33 minutes over my promise. So I don't want you to get mad at me here tonight. I know you're a busy man and so forth. And Ed and Barbara, I think you guys had a great dialogue in regards to this. There's so many unanswered questions, but until the authorities over in Nevada County decide if and when, and again, this seems to be a closed case to me. So I'm pretty certain that no more information is going to be released by them, because I don't think they're under any legal obligation to do that, which will continue to have our cyber sleuths heads exploding because they're not getting the information that they're looking for. But I want to say thank you. I know you have a website, Heartland Forensics. It's available online. I've linked it down below in the description. And there's a wonderful book. I didn't get to read it, but I'm going to definitely look into it, The Sherlock Effect. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Doc, before we let you slide off?
Sure. I know a lot of your audience are into true crime, but it is important for people who are into true crime to realize something. And that is that detective fiction and what you might see on the television is nothing like real life. In fact, real life doesn't work the way detective fiction works. The idea behind the Sherlock effect was that in the very first Sherlock Holmes novel, as he was talking to his sidekick, Dr. Watson, Sherlock Holmes tell him his method. He said most people, if you tell them a series of events, they can reason with their minds and predict what the outcome is going to be. I call that reasoning forward. For every 50 people who reason forward, there may be one like me who reasons backward, which means that he starts with the physical evidence and then using his intuition puts together past events that led to the physical evidence. He says that's reasoning backwards. Well, ladies and gentlemen, reasoning backwards doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is that there may be many, many different kinds of narratives, many, many past event combinations that can lead to the same physical evidence. So being able to determine what happened in the past from physical evidence doesn't work. Unfortunately, there are pathologists and crime scene investigators and what have you who use the Sherlock Holmes approach, and it's disastrous. Okay, if we were to sit here and take this autopsy and build a scenario around this, that would be a huge mistake. It doesn't work. That's why I insist on knowing what the front end of the investigation is, what the antecedent events are. That's terribly important. And the point of the Sherlock Holmes is that very point.
Well, I encourage everybody to go over to Forensics, his website, which is on here. I have it linked. Forensics. Why am I missing that?
Heartland.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Heartland Forensics. Go over there, guys, and check it out. You can look. There's many other writings that he has on the website. There's many other pieces of information. I looked at it quickly before we went live, and it's a chock full of information. Ed, do you have any more questions for the doctor and Barbara before we let him go?
No, it's an important point to make is that we don't work in a vacuum.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of thinking just doesn't get stuff done. So,
very good.
Yes, thank you so much, Doc. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you on here with us tonight. And I hope everyone goes over to your website and takes a look at your books and checks out what you have to offer. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you for coming on, Doc.
Thanks, Dr. Young. Pleasure to meet you.
All right.
Have a good night.
All right. So there he goes. That was interesting. I mean, listen, I will say this. There is so much that we have no answers to here. This doesn't get us into a better place than where we were before this. But at the end of the day, Barbara, I mean, you and I and Ed had reviewed some of the questions that came in. And I want to segue into that because I don't want to hold you that much longer. Most of that 30 minutes he was talking. So I want to get to you, Barbara, because we love to have you on here and the time is valuable. So would you mind if I grabbed a couple of these things and put them up for you?
Sure. Go right ahead. I've seen some good questions come across.
Yeah, I have them saved. So Ed, if you can, maybe you want to say hello to a couple of people in the chat while I pull up these questions.
All righty. So yeah, we had a few people. I don't know that we highlighted it, but let's do it.
A couple of super chats. Dr. Ed, I saw
Dr. Ed. Thank you, Doc, for the super chat. $49, $50. Thank you for all that are here. Hello to all of our usual fans, Debbie T, Black Rose 11,
Doodlebug
Lori.
Yes.
Sullivan Sleuth.
Lisa Hamilton.
Hey, Barbara, when's your book coming out? When's your book coming out, Barbara?
June 20th.
Oh, we got a date.
Yep, we do.
I love it. All right, listen. So these are some questions coming in from our good friend Cyber Sleuthy. She was kind enough to put all this stuff together for us. I'm hoping that. Wait a minute. I'm hoping for a second. Hold on a second. Give me 2 seconds. Hold on. So I want to put them up, but I want us to be on here as well. So maybe I'll just read them to you, Barbara, if that's all right with you. So first question is kind of basic, but it's important. Lots of folks are hung up on what the normal weight for the lungs would be in a 17-year-old female. And if she was a singer, like she sang a lot with her grandfather, we saw videos of her singing, dancing, playing music, playing an instrument. Would that have any effect on the size of the lungs that she's an avid singer and things of that nature?
She was a very small girl, small in stature, lightweight, and her lungs were very light, small, light lungs. Why is that? Because there was decomposition, and as bacterial action takes place, it gives off gases. So her lungs were hyperinflated. They were light, like when you put air in a balloon, just it's lighter. So they were small, light lungs, nothing unusual there. And it's almost always that one lung is a little heavier than the other.
All right.
So nothing, I didn't see anything of concern there.
Okay. So, and also thank you for that, Barbara. Would decomp greatly decrease the lung weight at some point? Do you have any knowledge on that?
Sure. As the lung disintegrates from decomposition, you're losing tissue. There was, I think there was some mention in there, like the liver had become homogenized. You can't see the individual cell structures. You can't see any of the ducts within the liver, the circulatory pattern. Decomposition is a mushy kind of thing.
Well, it's the bacteria. It's feeding on these organs and these tissues, and their byproduct are the gases that create the bloating. Okay, so the weight in the organs are going to change with more and more decomp. It's just like composting, and in this case, so that you're going to have those differential weights in the various organs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So decomp definitely does have an effect on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to look.
Somebody put a good question just passed by on the chat is, would, in my opinion, would the manner of death possibly have been undetermined? You can do undetermined every single day for every single case, and then we'll never get anywhere. We'll never learn anything. We'll never prevent anything. In this case, the circumstances of her being in the water, found trapped in the back of the car, the fact that there is absolutely no evidence of external injury. I mean, they looked at the strap muscles of the neck. They looked at the hyoid bone. There's no hemorrhage, no marks, no pressure indicating strangulation. She had no evidence of bruising or cuts to the skin, no injury whatsoever. Now, even after decomposition, you'll find in the skeletal muscle, you can find bruising if someone was squeezed or hit or anything like that. You'll see the abrasions, even despite decomposition. What else? We saw it, so there's no evidence, none, of external injury. Now, on the toxicology, we saw that she did have alcohol in her system. She did have marijuana. And as Ed rightly pointed out, that test number T250, whatever, covers more than 170 different substances, including fentanyl and OxyContin and all those things. They weren't there. Right. So to speculate, she was drugged and then pushed in the water, or she was strangled and thrown, there's no evidence of that. So why not go with what the totality of the circumstances, as Dr. Young said, the autopsy, the police investigation, and then the coroner taking all that information in and making the determination of accident. I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Very reasonable.
Is it abnormal, or could it mean anything significant with regards to what happened to Kiely prior to her death, that her left lung weighs more than the right lung?
No, absolutely not. All lungs are different weights.
Yeah,
exactly. If you look them up in reference material, you'll see the right lung and the left lung are always different weights.
Yeah. Yeah, I did see that. I did read about that. There's another question too. Why would there be absolutely no liquid, water from drowning, drink she had prior to death, etc., in her lungs or her stomach? And would it be unusual not to see any aquatic debris in her airways or lungs, esophagus, stomachs, the small intestine, so forth?
You know, as far as the water in the lungs, I think we covered that pretty well with Dr. Young, that it's a finding that is not, what would the word be? Not definitive. You can't definitively say there's always water found in the lungs, or there's never found in the water found in the lungs. And I did mention the freshwater drowning, how the water leaves the lungs, leaves the alveoli, and goes into the circulatory system, causing electrolyte imbalance and cardiac arrest. Whereas in saltwater drowning, it's theoretically, the water stays within the lung sacs, within those little alveoli. And so you drown, you suffocate. Dr. Young said that is they're both theoretical. Depends on what you read. So yes, they're good theories, I think.
Yeah, in our case, Dr. Tranchina, who used to teach our drowning course at our forensic science training program, said that drowning is actually asphyxiation or lack of oxygen to the brain.
Yep. Vinny Tranchina.
Would you be able to address this super chat from Mark Baker? Could she have died from fentanyl OD'd, but it was so small it wasn't detected in the tox?
No, the tox is a good, NMS does a great toxicology. They would have detected the traces or the metabolites.
Yeah.
First of all, fentanyl can kill a person with 1 microgram, okay, which is like the head of a pin. Okay, so it's tiny to begin with. So if they're looking for it and they're running GC mass spec analysis, they're going to find it, even at that small amount, because it doesn't take much to kill you from that in the first place.
Sure.
Right. And this question here that they were asking, what possible pathology would forensic evidence could Dr. Reber have used to determine the drowning that would not be included in the version of the coroner's report that was released under the FOIL request? I mean, I'm not so certain exactly what they're asking for there, but what possible pathology or forensic evidence could Dr. Reber have used to determine drowning that would not be included in the version of the coroner's report that was released under the FOIL? I don't know, Barbara. What do you think?
Well, the determination of drowning and accident is made with the autopsy report by the coroner.
Right.
So we don't, as Dr. Young pointed out, we don't have all that information. This is a diagnosis made on the totality of circumstances, which we don't have. And it is based on the reasonable assumption that you're found in the water, trapped in a car, no other cause of death seen, must have drowned. Yeah. That's a very reasonable assumption. I see nothing wrong with this autopsy. It's a good, thorough autopsy, very detailed. And the diagnosis of drowning, I think, is the right and correct one. Whether or not it's an accident is entirely up to the police investigation. Yeah. And apparently what they saw, what they found out from witnesses, what they found out from the tape, the video of her car going into the water, led them to say that while she was intoxicated, she accidentally drove into the water. And that's it.
I think the timeline, that tape came out after the pathologist made his conclusion.
Ah, okay.
Here's one for you, Ed, in these questions, because all the rest are for Barbara. Barbara is the star here tonight.
Indeed.
They say, Ed, should the pathologist have access to reports of how the car was flipped and how the body was positioned prior to the car being flipped? Would this be something that they would hold back from this medical examiner's report, final report? And should they have that information on hand before they make their determination? Like, in other words, what state the body was in? Because we didn't hear anything about that, Barbara and Ed.
Yeah.
But we
They
know
should,
they flipped the car. So,
well, they should have it.
Yeah.
but I'm saying we didn't. There was nothing listed in this.
No, it wouldn't be in the report, but it's used. Barbara, you can speak on it as well.
Well,
I
let
mean,
me tell you where I'm going with this, Ed. I'm sorry. I love you, Ed, but let me just get my thought out. This is the people. These are people who think that she was tied down with the seatbelt in the back, and that she was being held into that cargo area. Wouldn't, if that was the case, we would be looking at a criminal investigation here if she was tied down? No.
We would be calling it a homicide.
Yes, if she was restrained, right? But that information, according to the report there, the pathologist says that the detective informed him that there was no foul play.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, should a medical examiner, should a forensic pathologist have all the information available to them? I think so.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
I'm trained and I worked in a medical examiner system. But again, we got to work with what we have. This jurisdiction has a coroner, an elected person who is charged with taking information from the doctor, the forensic pathologist, information from the detectives, putting it all together, and they make the determination. The sheriff, the elected coroner.
Yeah.
So they get all the information, not the doc.
Thanks.
That's how it is in this country.
Remind me not to die in California. Thank you.
No, California is good. California is good. It's a coroner system, but they heavily listen to Dr. John Lucas, the chief medical examiner in LA, who is a fantastically smart guy.
Okay.
I trained with him, so I know.
Just not in Nevada County. I don't want to die. Here's a question about lividity. Would you, this is directly for you, Barbara, would you expect to have seen lividity at all with the drowning? Would it be unusual for the body to show obvious signs of lividity as it's being removed from the water, but no discernible lividity pattern 2 days later at the start of the autopsy?
There's your problem. Decomposition. Sometimes you will still see lividity even after a person's been decomposing for a week. And I think this was a week timeline, right?
Yeah.
14 days?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah. So sometimes, maybe, you could still see lividity. Now, lividity is the settling of the blood into the most dependent portion of the body. So if she was found, face up in the back of the car, you'd expect to see lividity along her back. But at the time of being in the water, having all bacterial action, the bacteria literally go into the circulatory system, into the blood vessels, and eat the blood. So what happens to lividity? It's gone.
Right.
It gets eaten up by the decomposition process.
Ron,
Go ahead, Ed.
Can I share something?
Sure.
All right. This will bring back some memories here. Let's see.
Hold on. Let me get everybody to laugh.
Is this a picture of...
Hell no!
What was that?
I just had my lady say, "Oh hell no." Hold on, Ed. We're waiting for the sirens. All right, Barbara, while he's trying to do that, I'm going to ask you more of these questions because I want to get through them. We're almost done.
We got 2 more minutes, Ron.
Oh my God.
She's on the clock. She's on the clock.
Oh shit.
I'm going to eat dinner sooner or later.
All right. Is it best practice to wait 2 days for after the recovery of submerged remains to perform an autopsy, or is it advisable to do it right away?
I hadn't heard anything about that.
So there's no best practice here. Like, in other words, someone's pulled out of the water, waiting 2 days or a period of time, not immediately thereafter, is okay to do that. It's not going to have any. There'll be no difference if, say, they took her out the same day and did the autopsy the same day. Would it make a difference 2 days later?
I don't think so.
No, we don't do that in New York. I mean, the body will come to the morgue and go in the refrigerator, and it'll get assigned to pathologists. And
a follow-up to that, Ed and Barbara, is what, if any, changes to the body would happen in 36 hours from the time the body is removed from the water and decomposition begins to rapidly accelerate to the start of the autopsy, or is that controlled when you put a remains in the refrigerant?
Refrigeration stops the clock more or less on decomposition. Bacteria go into a hibernation state almost when they're chilled. That's why we have fresh food with refrigerators. If we didn't, we'd have a big problem. So same thing with the decomposition of a person.
Okay, can you see the screen now?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Look familiar, Barbara?
It sure does. That's
Okay.
Vinny's slide.
That's Vinny. That's right. So the drowning body position is typically like this: head down, buttocks up, extremities dangling downward. And I believe Ventures with Purpose spoke to some of this. Okay. And then what ends up happening is postmortem injuries can occur from contact with the bottom of, the vehicle, when the body will eventually, in colder water, right, it will sink over time until enough decomposition occurs where the bacteria create enough gases in the body to have the body come float up to the top. All right. So in colder waters, it'll take much more time for those bacteria to grow to that point where enough gases are in the body to cause it to float. But if you have a change in water temperature based on season or whatever the case may be, eventually that will expedite the growth of those bacteria and increase the gases so that the body will eventually float up to the top.
This is great stuff. And this is right out of the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner's Office. It's the forensic training program here. So
That's right.
yeah, good stuff. 2009. Any updates to that, Ed?
No. Ed, they're trying to bring it back at the New York City Medical Examiner. They called me and said, is there any way we can bring it back? I said, here's all the tapes. Here's all the classes.
Yeah.
Here's
I'm almost done. I got to stop this. I have to stop because Barbara's the clock is going to stop in a few minutes. How standard is diatom testing in 2022? Would that have been beneficial in Kiely's case?
I don't think it would have done anything here. If you find somebody who appears to have been drowned outside the water, maybe you test for diatoms to see where they came from. What lake, what ocean, what bay. In this case, her car was seen going into the lake. She came out of the lake. No sense looking for diatoms. We know what they're going to be.
Okay, great.
In that lake.
All right, so that's a no. Would it have been beneficial to bring in additional forensic experts, example, anthropologists, odontologists, etc.?
Well, I'm going to assume that she was scientifically identified by probably forensic odontology. I mean, as Dr. Young pointed out, that the broken wrist on the left side, the end of her forearm, that has a metal surgical plate on it. It's not that common. She did have a tattoo also, which we can use. And if her parents had her dental records, show them to the forensic odontologist. I just realized, Ron, we should go back and explain what diatoms are.
Okay.
They're little tiny molecular, they're little tiny bugs and flora and fauna, the plants, the algae, everything that grows in a water environment. You can look for them, and then you ask experts who understand lake and river and bay and ocean biology, marine biologists. That's what they call them.
There you go.
There you go.
Here's a super chat. Sorry I arrived late. Can advance is this sleuthing? No.
Slothing.
Slothing, yes.
I think that's what you was trying to say.
Yes, slothing. Remove evidence of minor injury. Thank you. She's talking about skin slothing. So I just couldn't see it. I got my glasses off right now. But no.
Very minor injury, like we know that the soles of her feet sloughed off, as well as the toenails, fingernails, same thing, her hands. So very minor injury. Perhaps a scratch could be missed, but don't forget that we used, after 9/11, when all we had was some sloughed skin, we were able to get fingerprints and make positive identifications from that on those unfortunate victims. So that shows you the level of detail that we can see.
Yeah.
Therefore, if there's an injury on sloughed skin, you're going to see it.
That's good. That's good information. I just found like if they did use a forensic odontologist, why wouldn't they list that there in that report? Or was just that not necessary?
It doesn't.
Well, in New York, the medical in the medical examiner system, the ME is responsible for identification. In this coroner system, the coroner and the detectives may be responsible for the ID, not us.
Okay, we're almost done. There's only 3 more questions. Are her ethanol levels due to decomposition?
No, not entirely. The ethanol levels may have been upped a little bit by when bacteria do decomposition. It's like fermentation, as Ed mentioned earlier, and that causes some alcohols. But 88 milligrams, no.
Right, and that's what that was a subdivision A in this. They were asking it with her reported ethanol levels and liver tissue samples used. Do you feel it's consistent with someone who was inebriated?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. All right. So for toxicology, wouldn't hair have shown substances used, like drugs, within the last 3 months or so? Can you explain what cotinine is and what presumptive positive result is? Or
Sure.
what would a high dose of fentanyl and ketamine do to organs in the acute setting? Wow, this is a long.
Continin is a metabolite of nicotine, so a cigarette or a vape. Let's see, what else did we say there?
What's a presumptive positive result?
Oh, presumptive. That's when you do the screening test for 176 or more substances. It shows up positive. That's it. Normally, you pursue that. For instance, if it was ethanol, alcohol positive, then you pursue it further with GCS, and you then get a quantity, not just a quality. The qualitative, the quantitative. How much alcohol? But when it's nicotine, who cares how much? So they didn't pursue it. It's presumptively positive. What else in there?
What would high dose of fentanyl and ketamine do to organs in the acute setting? Would either cause damage to the pulmonary system or any other organs / tissues?
Sure.
Would that be visible on the autopsy?
Sure. Fentanyl lung, when you die from cardiopulmonary arrest, the lungs get filled up with fluids, with edematous fluids.
Barbara, can a decomposed body lose weight?
Sure. As the bacteria,
How about height? Can it shrink? In other words, if the person is 5'2" and they die and sitting in the water, can they shrink to 4'11"?
No.
Can they shrink to 5 feet?
No.
Can they shrink to 5'1" inches?
No.
His height is skeletal.
I love you. I was waiting a drop.
And you don't grow hair after you die either, Ron.
I was waiting for Barbara to give me an F-bomb. I'll answer it for her.
Oh, hell no.
Okay.
All right. But you have my permission to slap him when you see him.
Wait a minute.
All right.
One more thing. Were poisons tested for? Example, antifreeze, cyanide, pesticides, and if poisoned, would anything obvious appear in the autopsy? That's a good question, by the way. All of these are good.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so because the investigation would have to point them in that direction.
Yeah. And, like if antifreeze, that ruins your stomach, the lining of the stomach. I know what the other question was. Hair samples, testing for toxicology.
Right.
We use that for long-term drug abuse. Your hair grows about an inch. Well, mine doesn't grow an inch a month.
Mine
Certainly DutyRon's does not, but Ed's does. And so if in that month, if he used drugs, then sure, you'd see it in the closer inch.
And remember, folks, the average human loses 75 head hairs a day.
There you go. Thanks, Ed. I'm way beyond that.
Yes, you're above average.
All right. So I think we covered it all. But before we let Barbara go, I want to scan the chat. And first and foremost, thank you, Ravelyn, for the $2 super chat. She says, hello, critical thinking skills. I missed you. I want to say thank you to everyone who we missed super chat wise. And listen, our guest in the beginning, Dr. Young, we respect all of the trades here. Everyone is a professional on this panel. I had to go attend to some family business, so I left Ed and Barbara in charge. They took over Crime Time with DutyRon tonight. I had to leave, and I came back to the console, and what I saw in my eyes, was somebody who had a vision. You know, Dr. Young spoke highly about his opinions and his feelings about the coroner system. I mean, you asked him outright, you know, how he felt about it. So the bottom line is here, we have a lot more to talk about when it comes to the coroner system. And we're going to do a show that is pinpointed in showing the pros and cons of this. And it seems like there's more cons than pros to this system. And Barbara, you spoke quite often about this in previous live streams with us. And I tend to agree with you that it is not the ideal situation to have, you know, when determining causes of death, manner of death, and doing a thorough investigation where there's no type of conflict of interest, if you will. You want to talk just a tad bit about it before we let you go?
No, but we're going to do a major show on this, Ron, because it is a nationwide issue.
Yeah.
It's time to have standards and protocols that apply to everyone across the board. Otherwise, is justice done?
Yeah. No. Ed, you got anything?
No, I 100% agree. Remember, Barbara, we have the saying, right? Every scene, every time, and we want to add that third component, everywhere.
Right.
That's right. That's right, Ed. Let's put that let's copyright that and put it on a poster.
That's right.
Let's get this one last question because I don't want to have to answer it after it. But here, where the hell did that go? Did they test for something? I want to just see. Hold on a second. Where did it go? Damn it. I hate getting old. Oh, here it is.
Oh, roofie?
Roofies?
Rofinol, roofies. You know, it's a date rape drug. Makes you crazy. Makes you forget everything. Yes, they do test for that.
Yes.
That's in that panel?
Yeah.
And I had that in several cases. When I have a hypodermic syringe full of it, where mother and son con artist team suspected of injecting Mrs. Silverman with it to knock her out.
Irene Silverman.
Yeah.
Wow.
I went with a psychic to look in a field to see if we could find her body.
In Jersey? In the swamps of Jersey?
That's right.
Was that professionally while you were New York City medical examiners? So we used psychics?
No, we didn't use psychics on a regular basis. But you know what? If someone says to me, I have an idea and I'm a psychic, but I also have some ideas and some information that she might be in a field. What's wrong with going to look, right?
It don't hurt.
It doesn't hurt.
Awesome.
But do we use psychics? No.
We learned something very new tonight, that Barbara did go out into a field looking for.
Well, Kenny confessed that they buried the body in a construction site. So she's probably in some foundation.
Wow.
In the one next door, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what I found on that field when we went out there? There were railroad tracks coming through the marsh.
Mm-hmm.
I found a Santeria voodoo set up, a small altar with a dog's skull, an animal heart, some blood, some burnt sacrifices.
We used to find those in Prospect Park all the time.
I know, and that spooks you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, this has been an hour and 8 minutes of fun. I greatly appreciate your time, Barbara. I appreciate Dr. Young's time, and Ed, always appreciate you. Angela, thank you for the $5 super chat. I truly still do not believe that this was an accident. There's many of you out there. There's many folks. Listen, and one would ask me what my opinion of this is, and I would say to you, I feel that, we have to look at what's reasonable here. And again, everybody's definition of reasonable is different. So I respect both sides of the coin here. I don't say charge, let's go, there's a big conspiracy and a cover up. No, I say that, was this a thorough, is most top of the line thorough investigation? I don't know. It doesn't appear like that to me, but I'm not there. I don't have access to the case file, nor does Barbara, nor does Ed. And, this is going to be something that if you were looking for the answers, you're not going to get access to those case files. And that's the only way that we'll know who they questioned, who they didn't question, what did they do, how did they do it. We don't know.
And what the people they questioned said.
Yeah.
We're not going to,
But we're not here to dog you if you feel that this is, more than an accident. If you feel this is a murder, I respect it. And I always say that in the comment section when people say, I respect your thoughts and opinions and your what your thought process is. I don't have to necessarily agree with it, but at the end of the day, we're all going to have, nobody's going to be on the same page with this. Nobody's ever going to say, this is what it is. You know, could there be more looking into it? Ed, you said it, you know, Attorney General's office, somebody should maybe look at this thing or do an overview of it, or, you know, look at it from top to bottom. I don't know.
You know, we called the balls and strikes here. When we saw things that were out of standard, weren't good practices, weren't following the protocols and procedures that are in place for normal body recovery, evidence collection, documentation, we called it. I don't know what more we could do.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Adventures with Purpose thing is what really got me, is that they came there and in 30 some odd minutes, they go into Prosser Lake and they recover her car. And we have 20,000 man hours of failure. Kiki Ray, thank you for that comment. And they were told not to search that lake, that they covered it. That to me just screams, and it just cultivates, you know, questions and distrust. Because why are you telling a search group not to go search the lake? We got it covered. Well, there's a car right there, upside down, and 55 feet off the shore.
So there's a whole lot of interviews that should have been done. We don't know if they were done. That should be part of this investigation of all the people that were at the party, the last people to see her alive, and so forth. Then there's what the FBI did. They took the car. They took possession of the car. They brought it back to their lab. What did they do with it? Where's their reports? What evidence did they find? Then there's the California Highway Patrol. They took the car after the FBI released it to them, and they were working up the accident investigation. So what did they find? Where are those findings? And were all of these findings given to the pathologist?
Yep. Okay. They weren't. With that, gentlemen, I must leave you.
Yes. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for being here. Thanks for hanging out extra time. And Ed and I will finish this up.
Thank you. And don't forget, you got to take me out to dinner, the three of us, one night, huh?
Absolutely.
We're going to do it. We're going to go out to dinner, I promise. And the book is coming out June 6th, 2023.
June 20th, 2023.
Thank you. I was just testing you. I wanted to make sure.
All right. Good night, guys. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you, Barbara.
Barbara, there she goes. Now, listen, again, Ed, I want to thank you for having patience. I mean, that was difficult tonight. We tried to cover as much as we could with the professionals that we put on, but I just want the audience to know, listen, we don't pre-interview people that we have on here. Now, granted, we know Barbara, we know her for a long time. We know what her skill set is. And we don't have a pre-interview where we're trying to sway somebody in their way. I've had this happen several times in the past. I had an FBI an FBI profiler come on with me. He did the polygraph stuff, and he completely had a disagreement with what I was talking about, and it happened on air, and it was difficult and it was uncomfortable. But that's what the beauty of a live show is. You know, the live show is authentic. It's not rehearsed, and it's not. We don't guide somebody into our narrative. We don't guide somebody into our chain, our train of thoughts.
No,
so
we never do that.
Well, that's what we saw here tonight. It doesn't always go like a bed of roses. And if you guys are not yet subscribed to Crime Time with DutyRon, or if you don't know about DutyRon and Ed Wallace, that's what we do. We call the balls and strikes, and we have people on that are not necessarily going to always agree with us. And Dr. Young obviously didn't agree with us and didn't agree with the conversation.
I don't know that it's a fair, I don't know. Okay.
That's my assessment, but he was fair and he gave his
I mean, I didn't know that there was anything to agree with us. We were just asking questions, trying to answer questions out about the autopsy and the toxicology for our audience. I don't believe that there was.
The conversation seemed like a little bit, the air was thick, the parts that I saw. Maybe I didn't see enough. I walked away because I had to attend to something with my son. But then when I came back down, it just seemed like the air was thick. It seemed thick. Ed, was I wrong about that? Was I wrong about that? I don't know. Maybe. Anyways, thank you so much to everybody. You see anything of value in the chat that you want to pick up on? Sleuthy Goosey.
I see everything of value in the chat. It's all our families in the chat.
No, I'm
They're
saying
all of
anything
value.
that we haven't covered that maybe you might want to.
No, I think we covered everything.
And Cyber Sleuthy, thank you for putting together that that spreadsheet. I think it covered everything that everybody wanted to talk about. Yeah. All right. So I wasn't off. I only saw like 10 or 15 minutes of it. Heather Morsha said, very bad vibes. I felt sick. I only saw 10 or 15 minutes of it. You guys were about 25 minutes without me there. So I don't know. Maybe it was just I had a bad read on it. I don't know. Here's another one. Chat picked up on a thick in the interview, and it had nothing to do with you, Ed.
No.
But yeah, here's another one. Julie said it wasn't bad. All right, cool. I'm glad we got it over with. We're going to move on to other cases going forward. This is the end of us speaking about Kiely Rodni, unless there's something major that comes up. I hope we helped get everyone to understand or have a better understanding of the process. I think our second half, we really covered a lot of great questions. Barbara was just so awesome in, in answering the questions and so forth. So I thought it was really good. Anyways, Ed, you got anything else for the audience?
You know my usual. Stay safe, stay prepared, and watch your six.
I love this guy. Guys, and thank you so much for joining. I always like to say God bless the world, God bless the United States of America, and God bless each and every one of us here in the chat. Don't forget the Michael Valva trial still going on, and that's going to be closing up next week. I'm hoping that we can get a guilty verdict on all the charges that he's charged with. He is the father who froze his son, Thomas Valva, in the garage out in Center Moriches in Suffolk County. So we're going to be watching that and following that closely, and we're going to be talking about that in the future. Thank you to the moderators, the super chatters, and all of the replay viewers. You guys are awesome. You know what makes this place a great, great place to be. Ed, thanks for taking out the time, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.